another one of our little teachings, our live streams, if you will. Now, these live streams, meaning we're doing this right now live at 9:15 on this Saturday morning, but certainly these can be viewed over the course of time by friends, family. And what I want to talk about today, I think a significant issue today that we're battling is why are we just becoming heavy? Why are we so fat? So I titled this, What is Making Me Fat? Now, without question, how I eat, what I consume, the portions, the distribution of the types of carbs. Do I eat more slow metabolizing carbs? Do I eat more fast metabolizing carbs? Do I consume a lot of sugar? Do I eat a lot at night? Do I not break the fast? That is the ABCs. And certainly we've done live streams and we've done teachings on weight loss and weight loss protocols and what I think play a key role here. This today is a little bit of a divergence from that path. This, I think, is going to get more to the root levels. This is going to get more to the level of an area that you are not having any control over. So for many of you, I am eating well. Joe, I have reduced my portions. I have cut back on what I'm consuming. I am not eating after 7 o'clock at night. I'm exercising. Now, you know that I would really start to want to tear that apart. I'd want to see exactly what you're eating. I'd want to see the portions. I'd want to see the types of carbs. I would want to see a dietary scenario, what you eat after 7 to 8 o'clock at night. So all that being said, and distribution of your workouts. Do you do any resistance training? Are you doing anything to build musculature, or do you do all aerobic activity? Do you walk? Do you run? Do you get on a treadmill? Is it all aerobic versus anaerobic, which is you have to do some muscle building routines. You have to work on the legs. You have to work on the musculature to make you a more efficient fat burning machine. But the real issue that I want to talk about today is what are we doing to deal with this area, which are the influences, the components that I am being exposed to on a daily basis that I'm not even aware of, whether it's Bisphenol A, phthalates, organotins, persistent organic pollutants, pesticides, I should put in here herbicides, heavy metals. So I do not want to make this a biochemistry dissertation today. I do not want to make this a whole chemistry scenario. I don't want to make this difficult. But I'm going to explain to you how some of these components can affect you. And then I also want to talk about how vaccines are inducing high cortisol response, high inflammatory response, how it is antagonizing your pancreas and your insulin response. So I believe this whole scenario coupled, what I'm being exposed to on a daily basis, obviously at the end of this we're going to go through and say, how do we improve what you're being exposed to? How do I reduce those chemicals and so on? How do I detoxify them? So that'll be the Moneyball, so to speak. That'll be down to the brass tacks. What am I doing to deal with this? But if you do not understand this portion, it does us no good to understand the backside of this. So first, without further ado, Bisphenol A. What's going on with Bisphenol A? What about Bisphenol A? Do you realize that Bisphenol A that was used for years in plastics, in many of these plastic containers, which I don't have one right now, but there are certain numbers that you look for. I believe it's 3, 5s, and 7s typically contain Bisphenol A. I believe that's what it is, 3, 5s, and 7s on the numbers. These are BPA free. They've been for years, this particular company that we use. Our shaker bottles, Bisphenol A. What do we know about Bisphenol A? That these components, this chemical, what is bisphenol? Bisphenol A hardens plastics, is what it does. It hardens plastics. You know, you have chemists, literally, that literally come up with, it's an amazing compound. It saved us so many areas of distress in our lives. But you've got to see that there is an impact on your hormone function, on your hormone production. And literally, if you don't see that, it's a huge, huge problem. We say endocrine disruptor. What in the world? Endocrine. What is your endocrine system? Your endocrine system is your adrenals, your thyroid, your pituitary. So what we secrete from our pituitaries, our hypothalamus, there's a trigger that literally, it's a downscale approach that then begins to affect downline hormone-producing glands, thyroid, adrenals, pancreas, okay? That's what an endocrine system is. Bisphenol A is documented to be an endocrine disruptor. Phthalates that are found, most of this bisphenol A is in plastics, dishes, plastic components. That's where bisphenol A is found. Phthalates. Phthalates are also are just ubiquitous in the environment. Naturally occurring phthalates that are found in foods like celery are actually very, very good for your blood pressure. That's a naturally occurring phthalate. Chemical sources of phthalates that are used in food preparation, used by the food industry, that are ubiquitous in chemically, even in the water supply. Do you know what it does? It encourages fat storage. So just right off of the bat, and I have multiple, I'm going to give you a few quick examples of these components of how Bisphenol A induces obesity in children, and how organochlorines and pesticides can actually be a predictor of obesity and dyslipidemia and insulin resistance. And you say you're going with those fancy terms. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll explain it. How low doses of perchlorate, which is actually found in a lot of fuels, fireworks, fertilizers, it's in groundwater, how it can damage and affect your thyroid, displace iodine. Chronic exposure to organochlorine compounds, which are pesticides and herbicides, can affect the development of diabetes and thyroid disease. So what's that have to do with weight gain? Everything. If I'm inducing insulin resistance, I am going to encourage fat deposition. If I am encouraging poor thyroid function, I am encouraging fat deposition. So when I dismember or disorient my endocrine system based on chemicals or things that I'm being exposed to, I can now encourage fat gain, fat deposition, even if I'm doing good things. And could it be going back to maybe when you were 16 months of age, 18 months of age, 4 years old? Absolutely. And relating to the amount of vaccines that you've had. I'll prove that to you. All right, let's just keep rolling real quick here, because I don't want to spend a ton of time here, because I sense at times that when I get into a lot of this heavy-duty nomenclature, names for things that you might or might not understand, I don't want to lose you. But you've got to understand that these chemicals are going to have a huge, huge role. Organotins. Organotins are a lot of chemicals that are found in seafood, unfortunately. And I'm going to always encourage you to eat fish, but you have to know, you say, well, geez, you're not leaving me much, because I see meat and vegetables and some animal products and byproducts. I get all of that, and why I have a part 2 to this after the break that we'll cover. So, phthalates, it's used a lot in the food industry. It's a natural process of food preparation, prepared foods, processed foods, encourages fat storage. Bisphenol A is documented as being an endocrine disruptor. We have 2 things already, if I'm exposed to and holding on to these chemicals, disrupting how my hormone glands are producing, and I encourage fat deposition. The organotins that are found in a lot of seafood, because of what they pick up at sea, encourages a disruption in your energy metabolism. It lowers the energy-producing components within the mitochondria, and it encourages fat storage. So you have 2 things already, phthalates and these organotins, that encourage literally speak to your body about storing more fat. They disrupt the normal biochemistry in your body. Next, persistent organic pollutants. I will tell you, and I've even been talking to my wife, I don't want to use any more Teflon components. When I make eggs in the morning, it's on stainless steel. I use some organic butter, go for it. Use a little bit of olive oil spray, go for it. Put little bit of olive oil or safflower oil, go for it. Get away from the Teflons. Why? These Teflons compounds, I don't want to get into the specific chemical names, but they produce a family of chemicals that are in these Teflon or these non-stick coated types of components that when you begin to scratch them and superheat them, you begin to release low levels of these persistent organic pollutants. What do? They help so that your food doesn't stick, but there are chemicals in those non-stick pads that encourage blood sugar dysregulation. So far, 1, 2, 3, 4 different chemicals that I'm exposed to and components in my environment disrupt my endocrine system, encourage fat deposition, reduce energy metabolism, encourage fat deposition, and dysregulate my blood sugars. Pow! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components that are absolutely going to encourage your body to pack on the pounds even if you are doing legitimately good things. Jump down the pesticides and herbicides. This is a big area. So where are you going to find it? You're going to find it in meat products that we consume. Because why? Because the animals may be consuming components and vegetation that have these pesticides and herbicides. These pesticides and herbicides are not easily broken down in our body. Many of them have very long half-lives, meaning that if I don't efficiently metabolize them and break them down through my stool and eliminate them through bile and stool and through urine, I begin to accumulate. As I accumulate, as the animals even accumulate, then you are consuming much of this in animal products, even vegetables and certainly meat products. What do pesticides and herbicides encourage? They encourage more fat storage and deposition. So we've got 3 areas already that encourage fat storage. They disrupt fat metabolism, so that even as my body is trying to go in and extract, as I'm reducing calorie intake, eating cleanly, not eating carbohydrates that are fast metabolizing, which would be white sugars and refined. I'm eating slow metabolized carbs like quinoa, steel-cut oats. I'm eating beans that have a lot of complex carb, a lot of fiber, slow-releasing carbs. I can be doing all of that. These pesticides and herbicides, and now what I'm trying to do by eating like that is now to go in and start pulling some of these fat stores and breaking down fat, mobilize the fat. I disrupt fat metabolism. I discourage fat metabolism. Big area, which I think is a big area with pesticides and herbicides, is it's a blood sugar dysregulator. Now, why is that important? When I start disrupting my blood sugars, I could begin to have cravings because of a chemical overload that encourages me to go eat more. I don't know how else to say it. That's a huge problem. These chemicals, when my body becomes overloaded and I'm not processing and eliminating them well through urine and through stool, now begins to dysregulate my blood sugars. I can create hyperglycemic tendencies, which can encourage food cravings and carb cravings, and why I want to eat more junk. Heavy metals. Heavy metals are a huge problem. And I left this area blank as to where heavy metals are found, because I don't even know where to begin. Heavy metals are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Sodium arsenite. Arsenic is used in fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. We are just exposed to tons of heavy metals, and it's in the water supply. You've got to drink filtered water. You've got to try to eat foods that are more locally grown, where there's less chemicals, organic preferably, grow your own. Heavy metals, arsenic, lead, mercury is a huge problem. These 2 guys, mercury and arsenic, I think are the biggest problems. Cadmium. These 2 can interfere with blood sugar regulation, arsenic and mercury. Mercury amalgams, mercury in vaccines, arsenic everywhere. I mean, I have worked with people that have had horrible hypoglycemic episodes, literally not able to deal with their hypoglycemic episodes, and have done huge dietary changes, made changes, learned to eat slow-releasing carbs, more protein, more fats, and we're still struggling with blood sugar dysregulation. When we check them for metals, in a few of these folks over the course of years, we find heavy arsenic load. Arsenic is absolutely a blood sugar dysregulator, but in general, metals can lead to, again, endocrine disruption, how I'm processing and eliminating how I'm regulating my endocrine system, my thyroid, my adrenals, my pancreas, and absolutely documented in disrupting adrenal signaling. Huge problem. Vaccines. Vaccines are a huge problem. Vaccines can encourage high cortisol production in our bodies, which will lead to weight problems. Did I mess you up here? Did I mess you up? Okay. I'm talking.
I was laughing about vaccines. I was going to say, uh-oh.
Here we go.
The vaccines.
Here we go. Let's not talk about those vaccines. Sacrosanct. Don't say a bad thing about vaccines. You got to watch what you say. Vaccines. Can't get no views on this video. Vaccines encourage cortisol, excessive cortisol production, which makes you fat. Vaccines encourage an inflammatory response, which then can trigger an excessive cortisol response to tone down the inflammatory response, which will cause you to gain some weight. Vaccines can affect directly pancreatic function. Vaccines directly can affect insulin utilization, insulin resistance. So, in a nutshell, we have a quick overview of how chemicals affect us. And I'm going to now just quickly, I know I always say this, but I could, quickly, it's terrible. But I am going to quickly just read a couple of these because I don't want to spend oodles of time here. I think I have to learn to focus more on what your answers are. But I'm not so sure that me attempting to tell you what your answers are, if you don't understand what is affecting you negatively, that you'll even want to engage in part 2. So an overview. JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, 2012 says that there's an association directly between bisphenol A, BPA, the concentration, in other words, how much an individual is excreting in their urine, how much they've been exposed to, what their body levels are, and obesity prevalence in children and adolescents. So in young children and adolescents, I could be encouraging adiposity. I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to use the word fat. Gaining weight, more fat deposition. It's right here. Association between quartile urinary BPA concentration. In other words, the higher up, the greater the concentration. The logarithm shows the higher the concentration, the greater prevalence of obesity. That's a huge, huge problem, BPA. Low doses, PLOS, a scientific journal called PLS01, 2011, just a few years back, January 26, Volume 6, states and shows that even low doses of organochlorines, organotins, and what's in pesticides and herbicides, organochlorines, and PCBs, which I don't know that I put on here, but PCBs fall into, would fall more into the persistent organic pollutant category. PCBs, low-dose organochlorines, are predictors of obesity, dyslipidemias, meaning problems with cholesterol maintenance and triglycerides in many cases, and insulin resistance amongst people that are free of diabetes. So this is not in a diabetic population. This is in a population that supposedly has good blood sugar regulation, etc. Simultaneous exposures of these persistent organic pollutants. Now that's the key. See, sometimes when you look at these compounds individually, they don't elicit a whole lot of problem. This is looking at saying when we get numerous persistent organic pollutants and organic chlorines, more pesticides and herbicides, and we expose an individual to them, the more they're holding on to, the general population, it says here, can contribute to the development of obesity, dyslipidemia, problems with your lipids, and insulin resistance. And watch this. And what I would tell you, what I've taught you for almost 2 decades, common precursors of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Although obesity is a primary cause of these metabolic abnormalities, this is key, persistent organic pollutants exposure may contribute to excess adiposity and other features of dysmetabolism. You following me? that you could be not a diabetic, not have other endocrine issues, but you, as you are exposed to these chemicals are then affecting you and pushing your body to blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance, more adipose tissue, even if you're eating and doing things well. Short-term effect of low-dose perchlorate, which is found in fertilizers, fireworks, groundwater supplies, etc. It is well known the major effect of perchlorate is on the thyroid, and it's decreased, watch this, in thyroid iodine trap by competitive inhibition. You know what that's saying? That this perchlorate that is found in this category here, persistent organic pollutants, interferes with your body's ability to literally trap iodine from foods, actually make thyroid hormone. When I diminish thyroid hormone, I then can affect weight gain. But it says, you know what's interesting? That even when this thyroid iodine trap is happening, that your actual blood levels of your thyroid hormones remain somewhat normal, but there's an undercurrent, there's a slow residual effect, and it doesn't cause an aberrancy in your actual thyroid labs. Chronic exposure to organochlorine compounds, health effects in adults. This comes from Annals of I think Internal Medicine. This was actually done this is an Italian study. The article's all in Italian, but overall what they say, about half of the literature they find that they can document that serum levels in your blood of organochlorines and some level of disruption to what we see to fat metabolism. Endometriosis triggered by organochlorinated environmental pollutants. This comes out of Environmental Health Perspectives 2009. Why would I talk about endometriosis? Because endometriosis, I believe, has a blood sugar and an insulin resistance, maybe an autoimmune component, chemicals affecting. One quick literature piece, artificial sweeteners, could they be promoting obesity and diabetes? They call it here diabesity, or diabetes and obesity, diabesity. I've done shows on this. This comes from the Department of Immunology, Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. I mean, they basically go through and just talk about how artificial sweeteners literally trick the body. So you keep eating foods that are artificially sweetened, MSG, aspartame, etc., and they're actually literally encouraging. Now, I didn't even bring up here MSG. I don't really have it listed here, but MSG-related compounds, monosodium glutamate compounds, or related compounds to MSG, absolutely are documented in animal studies we can induce. You can find a direct relationship, inject MSG into laboratory animals, and you feed them the same amount of pup chow, and you can encourage and cause insulin resistance and weight gain, obesity. No more calorie intake. So now when a caller this morning called and said, look, you mean to tell me you're not going to tell people that it's the way they're eating that's making them fat? Well, I think it's pretty evident for the majority of the population that's the case. But there are many of you that are stuck. There are absolutely thousands of you that are stuck. And you're doing good things. And your chemistry is, look at all this junk I got up here. Look at this board. I mean, this is a toned down version. I mean, I could do an entire show just on MSG and artificial sweeteners and how they induce that alone. And I put it at the bottom of the list.
You have done shows on
I mean, I have done shows on artificial sweeteners and how they affect you and how they encourage insulin resistance in young children and obesity. So you say, oh man, now I'm depressed. I mean, I am so depressed because I don't know what to do about this. Well, we're going to give you the cute clues to that. But I would be really remiss if I did not mention quickly the role of vaccines. Experts review of clinical immunology 2013. And so you have to understand, a lot of this stuff we're going to start putting up on our site, on our blog section. Because I, first of all, don't want to be misquoted when I'm doing teachings like this. So we're just going to start putting this data up on the site. We're going to start doing more, and we already have begun. From the radio broadcast, the live show that we do 6 days a week, we're going to start linking Joyce Gibb, our nurse practitioner, and Diane Silverman, and some of our staff, and we're going to start loading up some of these links and then doing a quick summary so that it backs up what I've been telling you on the radio broadcast and on these live streams. Because, I mean, frankly, I would love to have all that available, but manpower, I mean, it's expensive to do that. It's expensive to do it. Clinical and immunological spectrum. Adjuvants, aluminum adjuvants that are in vaccines cause a release of inflammatory proteins, interact with what's called toll-like receptors, encourage inflammation. These adjuvants can lead to everything such as macrophagic myofasciitis, etc. Here's the key, though. What is my overview on that? It leads to inflammation in the body, which leads to excess production of cortisol, which excess cortisol production can encourage weight gain and fat deposition. British Medical Journal, Endocrine Disorders, 2014, looking at the potential of PCBs, organochlorines, etc., on polycystic ovarian syndrome. Why would I mention that? Well, polycystic ovarian syndrome is very closely related to an insulin resistance, hormonal disruption, and it is usually, there are women that are just battling components that they cannot get over. They're gaining weight, their testosterone's rising. It's a vicious ongoing cycle. J. Bart Clausen, this, I'm not sure where this actually appeared. It's an Open Endocrinology Letter Journal. Type 1 diabetes versus even type 2 diabetes, the two opposite extremes, how it's possibly more an immune disorder induced by vaccines. You say, what are you talking about now? Diabetes, and you're talking about vaccines. Yes, listen closely. Type 1 diabetes versus type 2 diabetes, which is really metabolic syndrome, which is insulin resistance. You follow me here? So even if I don't, and there's literature that shows that vaccines can encourage a type 1 diabetic state. Not my opinion. This is in journals and documenting this. But metabolic syndrome. See, when I encourage insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, I am encouraging weight gain, deposition, blood sugar dysregulation. Discontinuation of BC vaccine shows a significant drop in type 2 diabetes in Japanese children. The role of inflammation and cortisol activity as a cause of type 2 diabetes. See, when I start to move towards type 2 diabetes, not everybody, but the majority of folks begin to gain weight. They become more viscerally thickened. Adipose tissue begins to gain. So I'm not reading through all this because we don't have the time. You have to just you have to almost trust me on this and pick up the links. The discontinuation, when they stopped it in Japanese children, they stopped using BCG vaccines. It showed when they did this that there was a drop in the rate of type 2 diabetes. And then all they say is, with a period, then they say the role of inflammation and cortisol activity as a cause of type 2 diabetes. A review of vaccine-induced immune overload resulting in an epidemic of type 1 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, which would encourage you to become heavier in fat, right? You say, wait a minute, this is now like vaccines. Exactly. Chemicals and vaccines can induce, and it says there's an emphasis on explaining recent accelerations for the risk of diabetes and pre-diabetes. Say, Joe, you were talking about being heavy or being fat. Yes. I'm telling you, a lot of times this is a precursor to all this, and other immune-mediated diseases. This comes out of the where would this act? I think this was just printed in 2014. Molecular and genetic medicine. Honestly, not my opinion. This is good stuff, actually. That's enough on vaccines. I have more. So are you getting the picture? I could be doing well. I could have reduced carbs, found the right types, done the right mix. I'm doing some resistance training. I'm sleeping better. I'm understanding the role of how I'm eating. I'm not eating after 7, but yet I'm still only losing a pound a month. What is wrong with me? We've got to begin to look at this area. We're going to go to a break. Quickly, when we come back in about 5 minutes, I'm just going to go over some very, very key points. Foods that you can eat, things that you can do, little mini detox regimens that can actually begin to stimulate movement of these chemicals. Can't do a whole lot for the vaccine side. That's already, if that's that's been a part of your life, that's a part that I can't change, that inducement that may have occurred 20 years ago. You can learn from this and then give that information to others. Let's go to a break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us. We're back. Thanks for being with us. We're going to move. How do we manage this area? How do I deal with this? So I don't want to have to convince you of these effects of what we just covered. And it's a fact. It's there. So I'm going to give you a basic little prescription here of some things that I think that you need to do. And then I want to really encourage you out of the Word of God today. So I'm going to read you quickly a psalm, and which I think is very powerful. And then I'm going to come back quickly at the end and just encourage you with a couple key points. Psalm 23, it's about the shepherd. It's really, we're seeing here that God is a caring shepherd, and He's a dependable guide. And it really comes down to us following and obeying what He has directed us to do. And if we're obedient to that call, and if we submit to that call, that there's provision, there's peace, there's protection, there's forgiveness. You're going to see it all right here in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, and I lack nothing. And He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and He leads me beside quiet waters, and He refreshes my soul. And He guides me along the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for You art with me. Your rod, Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely Your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When I close, I'm just going to talk to you about what we see here. Provision, comfort, peace, presence, contentment from following Him. It leads to contentment. His presence is with us. Preservation again. Protection again. Provision. Plenteousness in our lives. And literally not only just a, if you will, a paradise type scenario or a piece of His presence in this life, but it's also in the life hereafter. Be encouraged today. I want to encourage you that if you're not reading the Bible, that you think about that. That you be encouraged with what, not just as a tool, as some type of manipulative tool, but I read earlier on the broadcast this morning that as we draw near to Him, that He draws near to us. David, when he began to fall in his life, had fallen away from God, and we saw complacency, we saw arrogance, we saw a lack of need for God, and his life for the following years literally comes apart at the seams. David was away from God. David wrote no psalms in that period of time. James says you draw near to Him, He draws near to you. It's an act of our will to seek Him. His presence is there, but it's up to you to seek Him. Back to our little teaching. What could we do? All right, here we go. Periodic fasting. You need to think about it. You need to periodically think about some fasting. Why? Because it resets your immune system. It helps to encourage a movement of chemicals. It'll cause breakdown of fat and adipose tissue. The only thing I don't like about just pure fasting, and it's a good thing from a spiritual standpoint, but pure fasting without specific nutrients like Mediclear Plus or one of our detox regimens, is because then in many cases, if someone has poor detox pathways, their liver is not being supported. So what we'll normally recommend is that you do liquid fast with specific nutrients. If you want details, go to the website, send us an email, and certainly you can just call the off-air toll-free number and set up a time. Obviously, the email address is askjoedimatteo.com or askjod.com, 888-865-9595 to reach our staff here. Exercise. When you exercise and move, you encourage natural detoxification processes. When I exercise and I begin to break a sweat and I begin to mobilize oil glands, I begin to mobilize a lot of these persistent organic pollutants, these organochlorines, etc., BPA, that in many cases is stored right in my fat tissue to begin to be mobilized from fat right through my skin. Love dry saunas and low temp saunas. I love them so much that I purchased an infrared sauna from Sunlighten, and you might want to consider this. I have one in my house. I don't use it as much. I feel like I spend way too much time here trying to teach you guys what to do, and I'm not doing enough of some of the things that I need to do. But I have used it. It's an amazing tool, amazing, to help you detoxify. Infrared saunas are worth their weight. They're not cheap, they're expensive, but I will tell you, you and your family members will garner great benefits from an infrared sauna. If you cannot afford that, you need to go to a local gym or whatever that has dry. I love dry versus moist heat saunas, okay? Detoxification regimens, what can we do? Well, you can get on to something like the Detox Essentials. I think you have to kind of go through like a food elimination. I don't have space to do that, but something like the Detox Essentials that upregulates the liver's ability to process and detoxify. You've got to do plenty of the buffered C ascorbates. It raises glutathione, helps you make more alpha lipoic acid, and then helps you to not only utilize pathways through the liver, but recycling alpha lipoic acid helps you to mobilize metals. A greens drink, or I have them down here like barley greens and wheatgrass. This is an interesting combination because it has multiple green types of products. It uses green tea. It uses spinach leaf powder. I mean, it is a mixture, green tea extracts. It is a mixture of greens that encourage detoxification. Get on some ground flaxseed. So I'll cover that in a little more detail. And I kind of even like this phase 2 detox because it has, once again, nutrients, N-acetylcysteine, some milk thistle for the liver, schizandra for the liver, philanthus, dandelion, uva ursi, and buprolium, which the last three help kidney movement, and also NAC does as well, an excretion of toxins. So you've got phase 2 detox, you've got a greens, an essential greens drink, our old standby buffered C ascorbates, and then Detox Essentials at a minimum. And then you need to go get some wheatgrass yourself. You need to go get some ground flax. You need to put that in your salads. You need to put it in some steel cut oats. But back to the basics. You have to do some nutrients. Why? You say, well, you know, years ago they didn't do that. You know, they didn't do that stuff. Well, the bottom line is 200 years ago, 500 years ago, folks were not exposed to what we're exposed to. Do you realize that there are literally up to 3,000 new chemicals that are made, designed, processed, and put into our environment before they're even checked for toxicities? Do you realize that they're just, well, we develop a new plastic and here's a new agent, and they put it into their plastic products. Bisphenol A has been around for probably 20 years, more. And literally, in the last 5 to 8 years, seeing the detriment of bisphenol A, which we did in the first part of this little mini live stream. So, I've got to use some agents and nutrients, but I have to have plenty of fiber, plenty of water. I've got to use something like some ground flax. I've got to use a lot of cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower. You've got to use cruciferous vegetables because they are loaded with an active ingredient known as glucosinolates, which have, first of all, anti-cancer activities, but they're also loaded with certain ingredients in cruciferous vegetables that encourage liver detoxification. Let's talk about foods that detoxify. I told you I'm going to make this clean and to the quick, so to speak. Foods that detoxify. Well, first of all, fruits in general, because of their fiber and their water content. You say, wait a minute, but I thought they had some chemicals in them. Yes, they do. But then it does. So what's your option? Go eat, Oreos, right? So we still have to eat them in order to encourage the detoxification process. Why? Because I need some of the innate nutrients that they carry to encourage that process. Green foods, kale, broccoli, spinach. You have to Swiss chard. You've got to eat green foods. amazing ability to aid the body's detox pathways. Lemons, lime, oranges. You know, one of the best ways you can start your day is to drink a glass, and some folks do it with warm water, a glass, one full fresh squeezed lemon into water in the morning. It does two major things. It alkalinizes you, lemon and lime, and that it encourages liver. It's stimulatory to the liver. And the one you want, what you want to kind of do in the morning is awaken the liver and stimulate the liver to begin its day at work, so to speak. Because now I'm out and about, I'm exposed, I'm consuming things. I need my liver detoxifying. Start your day with a glass of freshly squeezed lemon. And if you don't want to do it in the morning, do it at night. Do it somewhere in the course of your day. It is amazingly good for you. It alkalinizes you, stimulates your liver. Lemon and lime. Garlic. Garlic should be a part of your diet. The sulfur-containing amino acids. Amazing ability to detoxify. Green tea extracts. Green tea, drink green tea, e.g. CGs, not only have anti-cancer mechanisms, not only have thermogenic properties to encourage fat metabolism, but it aids your detox pathways. Beans, mung beans, beans and legumes, tremendous amounts of fiber, absorbs toxins, and we also see in mung beans that it literally kind of allows and encourages like absorption of toxic remnants on the gastrointestinal wall. I was remiss in not talking about probiotics. Sorry, we need to have probiotics as a part of this. Probiotics will make sure that your stomach, your intestinal tract, does not reabsorb a lot of your toxins. Why not add some hemp protein? There's hemp oils, olive oil, flaxseed oils, along with your ground flax. All of this encourages of movement of toxic remnants through the gut. Now, certainly, I could go into a lot of different things on foods, but let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Alkalinization, fiber, a lot of these vegetables and fruits I've mentioned here have nutrients that aid or support your body's detox pathways. The green foods, the kale, the spinach, the charge, the wheatgrass, blue-green algae. I forgot about that. Blue-green algae, a good concept. We talked about lemons, orange, limes, garlic, broccoli sprouts. But the sprouts, amazing at aiding detox, liver detoxification. Green tea, the catechins, and ECGC, the beans, lots of raw vegetables. When I want to do, I should be doing that on an ongoing basis, but I want to do a little detox regimen, I must do very specific types of foods. Those foods aid my pathways for detoxification. This is like a food scenario. I would really encourage you that if you want to engage in something like this, that you set up a short time, because then we'll give you a detox diet. We will then give you maybe like one of the recommended powdered nutrient meal replacements that you could maybe eat a quality dinner, steamed broccoli, vegetables, lean proteins, quinoa, and maybe you replace one or two of your other meals. Maybe it's your lunch with a detox liquid, and it's not something that's in a box that just makes you go to the bathroom all day. It provides you with many of the nutrients that we've talked about here. Acetylcysteine, N-acetylcysteine. It provides lipotropic agents, some of those ECGCs, some green tea catechins. All right? So you must think about doing that, and then you can still use your buffered C, add your food sources of fiber, maybe add some detox essentials. Now you have a complete regimen that you're engaged in. Along that line, then you need to think about some low-temp saunas or infrared saunas. Sweat it right through your pores. So, what is making me fat? Certainly what I eat, what I consume. Are there components that have occurred in my life 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 30 years ago that have encouraged this process? Absolutely. Anything that triggers an inflammatory response, vaccines, aluminum adjuvants that trigger an immunologic antigen response, trigger cortisol. Excessive cortisol can cause insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome leads to weight gain, adiposity. I start adding things in through the midsection. It opens the door to type 2 diabetes. But let's just say you're not at type 2 diabetes. It is changing your your endocrine system, chemicals in the environment. And when I had that whole list up there, it's even depressing to me to look at that list. But it can't be. I mean, if you are battling weight issues and you have done everything and you can't change the process and you legitimately can say, I have made these changes, if you don't begin to look at this, this is not hocus pocus. If you don't begin to look at this area, you will continue to stay. And remember that one article that even said that many of these chemicals that deiodinate or interfere with even iodine utilization efficiently in your thyroid, so that now your thyroid gland begins to not burn as efficiently, and it's subclinical, meaning that it flies underneath the radar before it even starts to alter or change your blood chemistries, your thyroid blood chemistries, so that your physician might say, hey, your thyroid's fine. But at a very low level, there's inefficiencies because iodine is being trapped and not allowing to be trapped by the thyroid gland, and these chemicals are interfering. Brominated breads, bromine even does that, let alone some of the chemicals that we talked about. I hope you've been encouraged today. There is a way out. There's a way out. You can change the process. You can. I read you Psalm 23 today. All right? We're going to go to some questions. All right? All right. And I don't want to read it to you again, but if you do an interpretation of Psalm 23, many of you just need to know that there's peace. Where am I at? Over here? Am I over here? All right. That there's peace and comfort that has to come from outside what you're normal. It can't come from a drink. It can't come from alcohol. It can't come from pot. It can't come from more sex. It can't come from relationships. There's that void that's in your life that can only be filled by Him. Another person can't fill it. Another boat can't fill it. Making more money doesn't fill it. You think it does. They're temporary. They're fleeting. The Bible says that they are very fleeting. But I don't want to go back. I already read that to you. The Lord is my shepherd and I lack nothing. And He makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside quiet and still waters. But if you do an interpretation, I'm going to just read to you what many of these, when you reinterpret these words, what it means. First of all, it declares Him as a great shepherd over us and for us. It declares that there's comfort in our lives that comes only from Him. That there's provision for your life, physically, financially, spiritually. That there's peace that comes from a knowledge in seeking Him. That there's a pardon, there's forgiveness that comes only from Him, true forgiveness. His presence is with us. Nothing can displace His presence. That's what we should covet the most. Contentment comes from following Him. Literally, as we begin to follow and pursue Him, that contentment comes as a result of the peace of following Him. That says that I will fear no evil, for you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. There's His presence and preservation again. And you prepare a table for me. There's protection. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. There's plenteousness that will come from you pursuing Him. And literally it says, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That literally we worship Him at church, but we can worship Him right in this office. You can worship Him in your car. It doesn't matter where it is. And it guarantees that when you do that, that you usher in His presence into your life. I hope you receive something today from this, from all aspects, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, and hopefully from a practical standpoint, in a practical sense. God bless you. Thanks for being with us. Tell your friends and your family, but it doesn't matter where they are. Tell them to tune in. Look at the live stream. Maybe it helps and blesses them. God bless you. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you next time.